Hello and welcome to Pest Control Unlocked. My name is Konstantin Schwartz. Let's start with three numbers here. 129. That's how many days are left before all EU rodenticides expire, and there's still no renewal decision. 130. That's how many pesticide illnesses California recorded from people using bug bombs at home. And 14. That is how many days a New York City building now has to get a rat inspection done. After that, the fines start. 3 continents, 3 products, 3 agencies, 1 direction. All season I've argued the same thing. External shocks are pushing this industry away from calendar-based services and toward monitoring and precision. I've mostly argued that on money, route density, fuel, and labor. This fortnight the argument changed. A German federal agency has written sensor monitoring into the law, not as good practice, but as the named replacement for the thing you can no longer do. Now, let's talk about macro levels. Let's talk about the rodenticide cliff edge. This is the biggest story of the fortnight. It happened in Europe. Most of the American industry hasn't even noticed it yet. Here's the position. A 2024 EU decision pushed the expiry of 7 anticoagulant actives out to the 31st of December of 2026. All 7 are classified as toxic to reproduction. 5 also build up in the environment and do not break down. As of this week, Brussels has published nothing. The committee that has to give the opinion last met in May. It did not adopt one. So here's where we are. 7 active substances, 27 member states, 129 days to go, no decision. If you run a multi-year rodent contract in Europe, check it this week. If there's no clause covering a substance being withdrawn, you're carrying a risk you have not priced. Germany already pulled the trigger. Here's why this is more than a paperwork delay. Since the 1st of July, permanent baiting is illegal in Germany, where there is no infestation. You have to find the infestation first. You have to document it, and only then can you use an anticoagulant. Bait checks move from monthly to weekly. Treatment can only run for about a month, and only trained professionals can do it. Austria has copied the rules. Now the important part. The German Federal Institute named the replacements: visual inspection, non-toxic bait, and in their words, remotely monitored systems such as traps or devices equipped with sensors and radio transmission technology. So just to repeat once more, a national regulator has put sensors into the compliance pathway. And Germany is not alone. On the 12th of August, the Netherlands told Brussels about their new rules. They are built on IPM principles. The stated quote is to prevent the use of rodenticides or limit their use as much as possible. That process runs to the 13th of November. Great Britain went the other way. This is the biggest post-Brexit split I've seen in our industry. The new GB regulations pushed 6 anticoagulant expiry dates from January 2027 out to July 2031. That is 105 product combinations postponed. So Britain has a 5-year runway. Europe has only 4 months. But here's the awkward part. The Animal and Plant Health Agency sequenced the rodents. 73.7% of Norway rats carry resistance mutations. For house mice, it's 94.8%. Britain has bought 5 more years of chemistry that is already failing in the field. I covered El Nino in episode 8 and nothing has moved. Still about 90% odds of a very strong event. Still a 69% chance of a record between October and December. Atlantic activity stays quiet, so no storm-driven termite surge this year. What is new is on the ground. Drought now covers 52.7% of the lower 48 states. Creeks and ponds have dried up across Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. And the Midwest is 10 days past the derecho. 6 to 9 inches of rain, 53 Indiana counties under a national emergency, some still with little or no relief. Rodents move indoors and fly numbers build about 2 to 8 weeks after water recedes. That puts the peak in late August through early October in the Chicago to Indianapolis corridor. That is your window for surge staffing and outbound sales. It is open right now. Europe is worse, and our trade press has not touched it. Half of the EU and UK is in drought. 4 major rivers are record lows. Over 500,000 hectares have burned this year, against 379,000 in all of last year. 1 vector number from each side. American West Nile has its earliest start on record, 48 cases by the end of June against the normal of 10. And European West Nile hit 625 local cases across 12 countries with 6 regions seeing it for the first time ever. And on the cost side, diesel was in episode 8. And it got worse. Price went up another 19.7 cents on average to $5.45 a gallon. That is $1.74 above last year. European diesel is up 30.8% year on year, and nobody has hedged it. That is the clearest reason Rentokil's European growth is coming from price rather than volume. The new item is trade. On the 22nd of August, a 50% duty went live on about $20 billion worth of Canadian goods. It covers 439 tariff lines. Printed circuit boards are on the list. There are no exemptions under the US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement and nothing for goods already in transit. So if you buy monitoring hardware or gateways that are assembled in Canada, go and check where the parts come from. This week, not this quarter. And note the irony. Regulations started pushing us toward monitoring, and a tariff hit the piece of monitoring hardware in the same fortnight. So my take at this stage is that I do not think Brussels lets all 7 substances lapse cleanly on the 31st of December. I expect an extension of some kind. The alternative is a 27-country control gap over winter, and nobody wants to own that. But here's the part I would weigh more heavily. I do not think it matters much, but Germany moved without waiting for Brussels. The Netherlands is following. The national rules are where the change is happening. Even if the EU blinks on the date, permanent baiting as a recurring revenue model is finished in Germany and Austria. So if you work in Europe, do not plan for a reprieve. Plan for a monitored device estate, alert-driven response instead of scheduled bait replacements, and sell that change now rather than absorbing the cost of it later. One of the aspects I didn't cover in episode 8 because I couldn't see it was with regards to the reorganization at Rentokil. So I'm not going to go into it with detail. There's 2 divisions. Carrasco is managing North America, Wood, the international division. Joachim arrives as transformation officer on the 7th of September. If you missed it, go back 1 episode. What I did not have then was the European picture. It changes things. Europe is now one of 5 regions sitting inside of international. It has no voice at group level at all. And international was better half of the business. Organic growth went from 2.7% in the first quarter to 4.2% in the second. Margin was at 19.1%. Retention up to 86.1%. Contract revenue grew 7.1%, while jobbing grew 3.8%. So the division that was working lost its seat at the table in the same fortnight as its rule book started to change and being rewritten by the authorities. One new detail worth having. The termite and litigation provision is confirmed at $392 million. Of the $47 million added in the first half, $44 million came from outside the Gulf states and from bigger commercial cases. That matters. This is not a contained Terminix legacy problem anymore. Expect tougher termite warranty terms across the sector, which is a margin opportunity if your claims history is clean. Rollins, just briefly, because of the dedicated episode, has all the detail. Guidance was trimmed, commercials up 7.2%, residentials up 3.6%. Commercial now outgrows residential at both public companies. That is a structural point. Then on the M&A side, tuck-in activity in the States carried on at its usual pace. Fortress added A1 exterminators, Advanced IPM bought ProSource in Southern California, and inside our window, Charta Vista picked up Sunshine Services in Tampa Bay on the 19th of August. So the deals did not stop. What is missing is a big platform transaction, and it is a very different thing entirely. Europe is where the signal is, though, and it is about what the deals mean rather than how many there were. Partners Group's Pest Control Partnership bought APC in Nuremberg in May. Over 330 staff, 6 sites. Look at that timing. They bought into Germany the month before the baiting ban took effect. That looks like a deliberate bet on the monitoring transition. And if it is, somebody did their homework. The other one to watch is Mario Nutriscience's buying Certified Group. 31 labs, around $300 million of revenue. That is the food safety audit layer consolidating, and it sits directly above food plant pest control. Fewer and bigger auditors means tougher, more standardized requirements coming to you. Meanwhile, Rentokil has cut deal spend to about $120 million and pushed portfolio details out to February 2027. So independents have a window while the biggest buyer is distracted. One technology note, because it makes the point. No European pest tech company raised money in this window. What did happen was a sales argument. Anticimex Germany is telling customers that bait-only programs are often no longer legal in 2026, and their system meets IFS, BRC, and GMP audit requirements. So this market is now driven by regulation, not venture money. That rewards distribution and good reporting, not the best hardware. So let's move on to levers. This is a smaller call and held loosely. The European monitoring companies that win the next 3 years will be the ones with good audit reporting, not the ones with the best sensor. When your buyer is a compliance officer, paperwork beats hardware. Let's move on to the guardrails. Neonicotinoids now have a date. On the 20th of August, the EPA published a proposed settlement. It came out of a lawsuit above the agency taking too long on a 2020 petition. The agency has now committed to a decision by the 30th of April 2027. The question is whether to revoke all food tolerances for the big 5 neonicotinoids. Comments close on the 21st of September. That is the only formal chance to weigh in. Now, to be precise, it is a food use action. It does not automatically cancel structural uses, but it drives label changes, product exits, and price rises from the suppliers. And imidacloprid is a workhorse in termite pre-treat and general structural work. So start qualifying alternatives for your food-adjacent accounts on a 2027 timetable, not on an emergency one. In Europe, glutathione expires on the 30th of September with no renewal filed, and piperonal butoxide has a deadline of the 28th of December. PBO matters more than it sounds because it is a synergist in a huge number of formulations. Now let's take a look at the consumer channel, which is being dismantled. I want to spend some real time here because this is the part our channel keeps skipping. Start with a scale. An EPA survey in 1976 found that over 90% of American households use pesticide in the home, garden, or yard. 50 years on, that has not changed. What has changed is the money. The market is worth between $12.75 to $20.9 billion in 2026, growing at 6.6 to 9.2% per annum. That is a lot of product going out to people with no training, no diagnosis, and no follow-up. And the evidence on whether it works is split. Personal protection is the strong side. Permethrin-treated clothing plus a DEET repellent has shown close to 100% protection against tick bites. And for most of these diseases, there is no vaccine. The weak side has 3 parts. First of all, children. About half of pesticide poisoning calls involve children under 6, and about 90% of those happen inside the home. Resistance. A 2025 study found cockroach resistance running 2.3 to 3.8 times the baseline. It tracked directly with how often people sprayed. 73% of the households surveyed were spraying weekly or more. And then efficacy. A large controlled trial tested tick barrier sprays on residential yards. It cut tick numbers by 63%, and it produced no reduction in tick bites and no reduction in confirmed tick-borne diseases. Fewer ticks, same number of infections. So which products are actually in the firing line? 3 categories. They follow the same path. Foggers. On the 29th of June, California's pesticide regulator opened a formal review of indoor consumer bug bombs or total release aerosols. The trigger was illness data. 391 reported injuries or illnesses between 2018 and 2024. That is about 56 a year. The review covers 12 active ingredients, and almost all of them are pyrethroids. A review is not a ban, but it is the front end of the same process that produced California's rodenticide rules. And note what the concentration means. NPMA's Dr. Jim Fredericks has warned for years about our dependence on a single chemical class, saying plainly, I believe we need more variety in our actives than just the pyrethroids. A review covering 12 pyrethroid-based actives at once is exactly the risk he was describing. The efficacy case was never stronger either. The EPA already says foggers should not be your only method for bedbugs. If the material cannot reach where they hide, it will not kill them. You're treating air in a room. The pest is not in the air. Glue traps. Internationally, this is close to settled. In the UK, general use is banned. Professionals need a license, and only as a last resort, case by case. Wales acted under its Agriculture Act. Scotland followed. In Victoria, Australia, they're banned outright for animals, including for commercial pest control operators. In the US, it is happening city by city and speeding up. West Hollywood, Ventura in March, Culver City, whose rules cover insect traps too, and New York City has a bill to ban sales citywide. Here's the detail that matters if you run multi-site accounts. Some of these rules carve out sticky monitors for IPM work in food handling, usually with a daily check requirement. Some do not. Nobody has standardized it, so compliance across jurisdictions is a genuine headache. The industry response is the interesting bit. Instead of defending the product, a group of industry figures launched a responsible glue trap user certification this year. It is built on field judgment, documentation, and accountability, not on the device. The logic was simple. Set your own standards or somebody else will set them for you. That is a template, and I think it's the right one. Consumer rodenticides. This category has already been through the whole cycle. Second-generation anticoagulants are out of consumer retail completely. Products capped at 1 pound of bait. Tamper-resistant stations only. No loose pellets. Part of the issue still lies, though, that you can buy products over the internet, which is not regulated. And Rhode Island signed a law in June phasing out retail sales between 2027 and 2029. But it exempts licensed commercial applicators. Look at the shape of that. Consumer channel restricted, professional channel protected. That pushes volume straight to licensed operators. Now let me pull all of this together. There's 4 items. 1, Germany naming remote monitoring as the replacement. 2, Colorado. And let me be accurate here because I have seen this misreported. That bill was postponed indefinitely in April. It is not advancing. But the text set a precedent worth watching. It made electronic monitoring a legal condition for baiting. Watch for that language coming back in the 2027 sessions. 3, New York City Local Law 8, a 14-day rat inspection clock. Fines rising from $300 to $2,000, and the law explicitly names hiring a licensed exterminator as a way to comply. 4, England. From the 30th of November, AWAB's law, Phase 2, covers pest infestations in social housing. That brings a 24-hour emergency response duty. Then the enforcement backdrop. B&M Retail was fined £2 million over mice at 3 Birmingham stores. The company's own position was that the procedures existed, but they had not been followed. This is the best sales tool available to a commercial operator right now. It shifts the conversation away from price per visit. It moves it to documented proof that the work was done. That is exactly what a monitoring system gives you and a paper log does not. And on licensing, New York's DEC is rewriting its certification, training, and permit rules. There's a stakeholder meeting on the 27th of August. The EPA has also restarted its dialogue committee, with nominations closing the 16th of September. If you want an industry seat at that table, that is your date. So let's take a look at what's under pressure. A fogger treats a room. A glue board treats a floor. Permanent bait treats an area on a schedule. Every product in the firing line is a broadcast tool. You aim it at a space instead of at a problem. That is the same finding as the tick spray trial, 63% fewer ticks and no change in disease, because treating an area is not the same as targeting. Now, I nearly drew the wrong conclusion from that, so let me be careful. It would be neat to say regulators are not coming for the chemistry, only for imprecision. That is not true, and the evidence in this episode says the opposite. The 7 EU anticoagulants are not going because of how they are deployed. They're going because of what they are. Toxic to reproduction, mostly persistent, and building up in the food chain. That is a judgment about the molecule. Same with the neonicotinoid review. And the Fogger review started from human illness data. Environmental fate, carcinogenicity, and reproductive toxicity sit near the top of every regulator's agenda. All of that is chemistry. So there are two forces running at once, not one. The first is hazard-based. It takes actives out of the toolbox, and it will keep doing that. The second is use-based. It restricts how the survivors can be applied. Germany is the clearest example. Nobody banned the bait. They banned putting it out permanently when there's no infestation. And here's why the combination matters. The two compound. As hazard reviews thin the toolbox, whatever survives comes wrapped in tighter conditions of use, fewer products, and more rules about applying them. So precision is not just a better way to work. It is increasingly how you keep access to what is left. So going forward, I expect at least one more state to file Colorado-style language in 2027, linking electronic monitoring to permission to bait. I'm not confident it passes anywhere. I'm fairly confident it will get filed, though. And a question for you, because I do not have a settled answer. The glue trap certification is our industry setting a standard before the regulator does. Is there an equivalent worth building for monitoring? A documentation standard we write ourselves before Germany's approach turns up somewhere less convenient. Because right now, the only people defining what monitored means are the people selling the sensors. If you want to take one thing from this episode, take this. For years, the case for monitoring was a money argument. It was a decent one. This fortnight, it became a compliance argument in a major market. And at the same time, the consumer market started losing exactly the products that treat spaces instead of problems. Those two things are the same thing. So one date before I go. Pestworld is between the 20th and 23rd of October at the Gaylord Texan in Grapevine. It sits currently after Germany's consumer's deadline passes, and it's about 10 weeks before all 7 EU anticoagulants expire. So it is the last time this industry gathers in one room before the cliff edge. If you are going, the question I asked earlier is worth putting to people in person. Who gets to define what monitored actually means? And do we write that standard ourselves or wait for someone else to write it for us? I would like to hear what you have to come back with. Credit to the research behind this sweep and to Dr. Fredericks, whose public record I've drawn on again. I hope to see you next week. Thank you very much for listening.